stuff. Station 11 was a pleasant surprise. It was a series that I was very hesitant about starting, and I will admit I even struggled continuing the show on my first watch through. Even though on paper me and Station 11 are best friends, a couple of early episodes failed to hold my attention, and I feel like the show even acknowledges how it comes across at some points.
So pretentious!
Dan is kind of like us, the audience, as his understanding of culture is more modern and less 16th, 17th century Shakespearean plays. In fact, he doesn't know Shakespeare, but when he hears the name Arthur Leander, he recognizes him as the Orion soldier from the dumb action blockbuster, which makes sense as to why Dan would recite the Independence Day monologue for his audition. However, like Dan, some of us uncultured croutons need to give Shakespeare and the Traveling Symphony a try. There's something special about Station 11. It definitely rewards you with some of the greatest TV episodes I think I've ever seen. That, accompanied by beautiful cinematography, powerful acting, and a score that stands out above most of what I've heard in the past 5 years. By the way, here's the title of the song that I know is your favorite. Today I'm going to talk about Station 11 and give my analysis on it. Hopefully one that's better than what your English teacher would give. Jeevan. Oh, Jeevan. Jeevan begins the series jobless and without direction. He is clueless on what to do. In fact, Jeevan's sister, Sia, claims that he owes her $18,000 and eats cereal for breakfast. However, Jeevan still has this need to find meaning and purpose and all that good stuff, which is why he initially runs on stage to help Arthur. But when he gets to Arthur, Jeevan doesn't know what to do. But then he sees Kirsten, who seems to be distraught and confused that her father figure is doing a heart attack thing and is getting taken away. The one thing Jeevan felt capable of doing was helping this little girl find some adult to help her. At the end of Station 11, Jeevan claims that he used to be afraid of everything. But then when he met Kirsten, Jeevan grew up, as he took on the responsibility of looking after her. This is first shown to us when Jeevan and Kirsten are in the grocery store. During this time, Jeevan is reminded of the existential dread that would come to you when you realize the world is ending. And then he claims that he would have a panic attack at that moment, but ends up not getting one, because it's no longer about him. He coincidentally is operating under the same advice that Arthur gave Kirsten.
It's not about you. Put all of your attention on the other person.
Even though he lost his girlfriend, his sister, and everyone else in his life, Jeevan was in full parent mode. Then, later on, he shifts that focus to all the pregnant women in Deborah's impromptu hospital, also known as the birth center. At the beginning of the story, Jeevan runs up to the stage to help Arthur Leander suffering from a heart attack, but he was unable to give him proper care because he wasn't a doctor and lacked, any medical experience, which commonly makes you incapable of dealing with someone who's having a heart attack right in front of you. But then by the time we end the series, Jeevan went from wanting to be a doctor to becoming Dr. 11 to lying about being a real doctor to finally becoming a doctor. Jeevan also turns into the best parts of his siblings, becoming a doctor just like his sister and looking after children, and Jeevan later walks with a cane just like his brother Frank, indicative of how he's become just like him, in a sense where he's more optimistic and nurturing. When Jeevan reaches Arthur, he has no idea what to do. When Frank gets stabbed, Jeevan is a wreck and also doesn't know what to do. But when Sarah is in the hospital bed and feels she is ready to pass, Jeevan is finally able to help someone who's had a heart attack. In this case, it's making the transition a peaceful one. Like Frank, Kirsten wanted to stay at Frank's apartment. Then after her and Jeevan left, Kirsten wanted to stay in the cabin in the woods. But after Jeevan disappeared, Kirsten was left with no choice but to venture out into a stranger's galaxy, quote-unquote. Kirsten then stumbles onto the Traveling Symphony, a Shakespearean acting group that continuously travels around Lake Michigan, performing Shakespeare in every town marked on their map, aka The Wheel. The unofficial motto of the Traveling Symphony is burn down the house and move onward. The Traveling Symphony gave Kirsten a sense of stability and security, convincing her that staying put is the real danger, because in every other place she settled down in, this happened and this happened. Kirsten starts this escaping her trauma strategy when she moves from one room of Frank's apartment to the next, not wanting to spend time in the room she was in when she found out her parents died. So in a metaphorical way, Kirsten is growing accustomed to burning down the house and moving on. Like how Miranda literally burned down Arthur's pool house before moving on from their relationship. The symbol Kirsten has tattooed on herself is the symbol of a rope getting sliced in half, a symbol taken from Station 11 to represent Miranda's feeling of cut and run. Miranda learned from her father that when a squall comes up so fast, you have to cut the anchor and then just go. Miranda recalls her dad slicing the rope in front of her with a fillet knife. Miranda Tyler's escape from the flu was on a boat called the Rope Spear, aka Rope Spear. Get it? The symbol is symbolic of her cutting her ties and running, hence the butterfly knife, and why Kirsten adopts the knife as well, and uses it during her performances. Kirsten avoids making solid connections with any of the people in the towns that the Traveling Symphony visits. In episode 2, Kirsten ignores some of the kids shouting her name. Kirsten focuses all of her attention on Alex, the same way Jeevan prioritized her. But Kirsten still carries that trauma from when she got left by Jeevan. In fact, she becomes incredibly protective over Alex, as Alex is one of the first babies born after day 0. Kirsten tries to convince Alex and the other members of the Traveling Symphony to stay on the wheel. I mean, we know Jeevan got mauled by a wolf, so when Kirsten says,
What about wolves here? What if a wolf ate the baby?
it wasn't too irrational of a thought, especially because they were having this conversation in the same area that Jeevan got attacked in. Losing Alex at a young age finally made Kirsten give up the book Station 11. Oh yeah, the book. Jeevan may have helped Kirsten survive the flu, but there was one more thing that got her through it. Station 11, a sci-fi book written by Miranda Carroll, about a stranger, Dr. 11, who we first meet floating through space unconscious. Dr. 11 then gets stuck on board a broken space station. Captain Lonergan is the one in charge of the station, but is left with no crew, ever since an explosion spilled a whole bunch of water into the workstations of the crew, drowning every grown-up. The survivors are the kids called the Undersea, who are now wanting to go home and build a future Earth. Miranda only published 5 copies of Station 11 on November 28th, 2020, 2 of which were given to Kirsten and Arthur's son Tyler. Both Kirsten and Tyler left their parent or parent figure around the age of 8. Kirsten lost her parents and found Jeevan, but had no choice but to leave their home knowing that all that was left of Jeevan was a blood-soaked book. While Tyler willingly chose to leave the airport and venture out on his own. But he really didn't have a choice, especially with Clark, the leader of the New World, wanting Tyler and his mom to just leave. After Tyler ditched his mom, he formed a connection with Rose, and their relationship may have been very similar to Jeevan and Kirsten's relationship, but Rose ended up dying during childbirth, and Tyler was back to being alone. When the kids were out on their own, all they had was Station 11, to the point where their understanding of the real world was molded by the book. Over the 2 years Kirsten had it, and the month Tyler had it, the terminology from Station 11 became a crucial part of their vernacular. Kirsten was even quoting Station 11 like it was the Bible, but this changed when she joined the Traveling Symphony. But Tyler would go on to use it like the Bible and form a cult with the impressionable youth. Tyler repeatedly read Station 11 in quarantine. He memorized it and then burned his copy in the fire when leaving the airport. The story of Station 11 came back to him when he needed it the most. The blue spaceman calmed him down. He would later turn the sci-fi into a real-world prophecy. And to be fair, Tyler learned from the best of the best. Like Jerry Mercer, a fake Homeland Security officer who created a false narrative and took everyone he liked to start his own commune in Florida. Does Tyler sending children to Gil's place to blow it up make him completely irredeemable of a character? Well, of course. But this is a show where a man holding an invisible microphone could generate the noise of him talking through a speaker, so we'll just go with it. Another reason why Miranda's story connected so well with the 8-year-old Tyler and Kirsten is because at the age of 8, Miranda was separated from her own family during Hurricane Hugo. Her family died from electrocution when they were in the water, hence the Undersea. When Tyler and Kirsten crossed paths, Tyler was pretending to be someone else. However, David in this scenario wasn't entirely lying when he was telling them about his backstory, except Rose wasn't Tyler's wife, but Tyler did end up looking after her child, similar to how Kirsten started looking after someone who was not that much younger than herself. When Arthur is telling Miranda about the corny blockbuster he's in, Alpha Beta, he says it's a two-hander, meaning a story where 2 people have to solve the same problem. And if you can't already guess, this is what happens in the main story between Kirsten and Tyler. Tyler was lost. He kept kept repeating the same line, "There is no before," when working through his trauma, that he developed after watching a man get killed in front of him. He looked at the adults that he knew as monsters. Then Tyler builds up a group of young followers and names them the Undersea. Tyler had the kids play Infection, but if the kids strayed too far, he would have them go to towns claiming that they're the prophet and recruit other kids. Apparently, this plan to build up the Undersea had been in motion for about 10 years now. The explosion at the museum was the signal for the Undersea to go to the Severn City Airport. Mr. There Is No Before wants to repeat the events in Station 11 and drown the workstations of the adults and destroy the Museum of Civilization, aka a way to remember before. When first watching Station 11, I was in panic mode, because when I saw the pandemic stuff, I was getting war flashbacks to the mess that we got from Amazon's supposed anthology series Solos, but thank it wasn't that. Granted, the scenes with Jeeva and Kirsten traveling to Frank's place triggered some unpleasant memories of uncertainty and fear of the future during that one event that happened in 2020, back during a time where the world felt like it was on its way to a really dark place. The book Station 11, as well as the Traveling Symphony, emphasized the importance of art, how we need art to make sense of the world, even after it ended. In episode 9, Jeevan comes across a piano with a song a guy edited from the recordings of his kids. This father was creating his own art and finding peace the same way Frank turned his audio recordings into a beat that would allow him to start rapping Excursions by A Tribe Called Quest. To add a sense of calm and normalcy to the situation, Kirsten sang Noel after they listened to the Doomsday announcement. Miranda used the book to make sense of the world around her and find peace when her world ended, which is why she tried making art for herself, something that the out-of-touch Hollywood elite surrounding her at Arthur's party couldn't understand. In fact, they were just preoccupied with traveling to places like Fiji. Some blatant, much-needed criticism about modern-day Hollywood. The Undersea kids dress up like the characters from Station 11 because they want to believe they're living in that world. Like how Kirsten made Frank's apartment the broken space station. During the disastrous dinner party, Elizabeth claims that she went to Prague, and when looking at the paintings,
It was like being inside the paintings. Stupid.
Tyler says something similar later on.
Reading it, it's like being inside a different world. Stupid problem.
And Clark and Miranda's responses are the same.
I don't think it's stupid.
I don't think it's stupid at all.
So when we see Miranda inside Station 11 at the end, she's thinking of the story that gave her peace and uses it to accept her fate. I could sit here all day and further explain Hamlet to you, but understanding Shakespeare is not the point of Station 11. In fact, it's just used to emphasize the central theme of the story. Hamlet is this one tragedy about Hamlet, who was wanting to get revenge on his uncle Claudius for killing Hamlet's father in order to marry Hamlet's mother, Gertrude, and take the throne. Like how Arthur dies and Tyler is left with his uncle Clark, who is finally at center stage and has the attention of everyone so he can become the leader of the airport with Tyler's mother, Elizabeth. There may be some parallels here. Tyler and Kirsten both perform the same scene from Hamlet, specifically the one where Hamlet's mother confronts Hamlet about not showing grief for his father's passing. And the most important line of dialogue they say is, "Seems, madam, nay, it is. I know not seems, 'tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected haver of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play, but I have that within which passes show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe." By saying this, Hamlet is expressing that his exterior and the words that he says in no way reflect the internal mourning and grief he's experiencing. This theme also comes up in Shakespeare's play King Lear. At one point, Kirsten recites Goneril's lines from this play, specifically the part where Goneril proclaims how much love she has for her father, King Lear, saying,
"Sir, I do love you more than words can wield the matter."
With that quote, Goneril is trying to say that words can't express how much love she has for him. Throughout Station 11, the characters use the words of cheesy sci-fi movies, Hamlet, and Miranda's book to express themselves in a way that's difficult for them to do otherwise. The Traveling Symphony didn't have to hear Dan perform Shakespeare to know that he belonged. They just had to feel the emotion behind his words, not necessarily the words themselves. The only way Tyler was was able to communicate with his mother and heal from what happened between him and Clark, was speaking only through Hamlet. Conveniently, the story of Hamlet and Station 11 line up perfectly with the events that our characters go through. The scene Kirsten put on during the last day in Frank's apartment was Kirsten's way of understanding what was happening between Jeevan and Frank. The dialogue in the play that the three of them put on matches the words Jeevan and Frank had difficulty saying to each other. Then after everything, we arrive here, where Jeevan and Kirsten need to part ways as this path splits into two. After they first separated, Jeevan and Kirsten went on to find different families. However, that didn't stop them from trying to find each other. In episode 2, Kirsten claims that she looked in the windows of the cabin, but it was the same as always. No sign of Jeevan. A detail that I really appreciated was when Lara drops Jeevan off at the cabin, she says,
I'll wait.
the same thing Jeevan told Kirsten when dropping her off at her house,
I'll wait until you get in the door.
implying that Jeevan was in good hands. During Miranda's job interview with Leon, Leon asks her if she knows the meaning of logistics, and Miranda responds,
The path things take.
but then Leon corrects her, saying,
Not the path, the right path.
then he goes on to explain that the shortest path between the point of origin and the end point is 6 inches, but the right path starts at the point of origin, wraps around Miranda's head, and travels to Des Moines, Iowa before hitting its end point. Then he asks Miranda where she sees herself in 20 years. This can easily be applied to the separate paths Kirsten and Jeevan had to take in the 20 years after the pandemic, even though they were close to each other this entire time, with Jeevan being part of the birth center, as one of their midwives is even assisting a member of the traveling symphony. Kirsten and Jeevan still needed to go down their separate paths so Jeevan could finally help people and become an essential doctor, and Kirsten could bring back Tyler by helping him move on from his trauma in order to save the Severn City airport. The same airport Miranda managed to save as she was dying from the flu. The little girl who was carrying the beacons stole Kirsten's copy of Station 11. She did this the moment before Kirsten was reunited with Jeevan. Jeevan turned his experience with Kirsten into a story that he tells his own kids, a story that served the same kind of purpose as Station 11, just like how Sia found comfort when reflecting on her and Jeevan's story about Jeevan barfing strawberry yoo-hoo on Jenny Kempkin. The series focuses on escapism and how it helps us not necessarily escape from reality, but cope with it, as the two kind of blend together. Like when Jeevan made up the fake story about Kirsten's parents getting stuck at the lake for the night and texting him that they need Jeevan to look after Kirsten. Even though at the time Kirsten was 8 years old, she was smart enough to recognize that Jeevan was most likely lying, so they were both essentially going along with this act to make the situation more convenient and easier for the both of them. Similar to how Elizabeth and Miles added falsities onto Clark's story to reinforce the truth and unite their community. By the way, another detail I really liked is how Jeevan named one of his kids Frank after his brother Frank, and named another kid Key, as in Kiki, as in Kirsten. Another thing I noticed was how in episode 9, Jeevan claims that they actually ran into 9 strangers since day 0. If you add stranger Frank and include stranger Jeevan, that adds up to 11, making Jeevan the stranger Dr. 11. And the mailbox at the cabin has the number 11 on it. After she was poisoned, Kirsten was able to fully understand what happened between Frank and Jeevan, because at the time, 8-year-old Kirsten couldn't quite process what was going on, but in this dream she was finally able to start working through her trauma, with the first step being able to say goodbye to Frank. Kirsten was never given the opportunity to say goodbye to anyone. When we see Kirsten run into Sarah after her and Jeevan split up, the first thing she says is that after she fixes the ship, she's gonna say goodbye to Arthur and Jeevan and her little brother Frank. I always found it interesting how she thought of Frank as her little brother. Kirsten was also robbed of being able to say goodbye to her parents. In episode 7, after she was able to fully process what happened to Frank, she found her own way to say goodbye to him. Then she was able to let go of Alex and trust her to go out on her own. And when we get to this fork in the road with Jeevan, Kirsten is finally able to say goodbye. Those are all the words that I have for you today about Station 11. I really like this series. I definitely appreciate the really artsy, limited series that HBO and Netflix are putting out. This kind of reminded me of Maniac. And if you made it this far in the video and you liked it, please subscribe. I think it's 1.4% of my audience is subscribed to me, and it's guys! So yeah, please subscribe to support this channel, and thanks for watching.